Alright, welcome back to Nick Lenz's Comic Corner, Classicos Non Classics. This is episode number 3482, Doubleshot number 3376. So, we have two Star Trek trades, first of which is from from the late Peter David. We have Star Trek New Frontier. And I did look this up. This comic is published, this of course collecting a 5-issue miniseries, published by IDW. And I did look this up. So, this is the only New Frontier comic book published by IDW. And one of only a couple, because there is not much out there for New Frontier comics. I mean, you got some for the four primary series: Star Trek Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise doesn't have a comic, but New Frontier. Here's something really weird about New Frontier. New Frontier just has a one-shot in this miniseries. The miniseries itself is sort of canon to the New Frontier novels, taking place between the novels of Missing Action and Treason. They do have one small error here, and that's basically Shelby, who is the Admiral of Space Station Bravo. Yes, she does be on Picard. But they imply she got killed off there, but they don't actually confirm she died. So here, it's mostly put just... now, they do bring up the fact that, of course, this is New Frontier. Mackenzie Calhoun is in this book, where he is basically in his warlord garb in this book for reasons unexplained. He, of course, still doesn't go along with Admiral Jellicoe because he seems like an admiral that no one gets along with, because his style of command is so dumb. It's like respect is basically not earned. For him, it's demanded. You have to respect him by basically, because he's an admiral. Like, his personality is so drastically different from liar admirals in Starfleet. I would say he's not as bad as Admiral Nechayev, who is a terrible admiral. She is absolutely worse. I've heard Essa Debris refer to her as Admiral Bitch, because he can't stand the woman because of the fact that she makes boneheaded decisions. Jellicoe doesn't really do that at all, per se. He may have a terrible personality, may have a good personality, but he does make stupid decisions like she does. Are you questioning Federation policy? Yes. They had her say in an episode of Deep Space Nine. So, yeah, Peter David wrote this thing with art by Stephen Thompson. So the book opens up, here's something really weird. This is what we call New Frontier. There's no actual physical appearance of, you probably think, okay, so I should point out, though, at this period of time of the New Frontier timeline, this is basically when they had the second USS Excalibur, because the first one was destroyed. If you're curious, the original Excalibur was I think it was a Constitution class. They basically retrofitted for the 24th century, and it got blown up in Book 8 of the novels, because of a virus. And then, of course, they got a brand new ship, which is a Galaxy-class vessel, and it was launched in 2376, which, you're probably thinking, what happened that particular year? Well, in the terms of Star Trek, I think that was the year that First Contact took place. Yes. This book is set in 2379. Yeah. There's some weird stuff here, and of course, Calhoun has got a dream. And he wakes up next to his wife, Elizabeth Shelby, who is an admiral. And then he gets dressed. And I am presuming, based upon the way that when they woke up, I am presuming these two must have had sex. Yes. Because, of course, they got married in 2376. On the bridge of the Excalibur A, and the person from the ceremony was Captain Picard. Yeah, the way that this proposal happened is that Elizabeth punched him for being gone, and then basically demanded that he marry her, because of the fact that they actually met when they were in the academy. And there was also a scene in one of the novels where when the first time they had sex, they had it on top of a rug. Yes, seriously. I remember that from the novels. Now, Shelby, of course, because of the fact that I read she was also time displaced, so if she wasn't time displaced, she got married to Calhoun when she was 40, and he was 42, because he's 2 years older than she is. So, given the fact she was time displaced in 2374, came back in 2376, so she's probably like, she would be at this point about 43, but in actuality, she's more like 41. Yeah. It's one brief scene that they have together, and then they go off. There's some with, and of course, the new Talon, where we have Robin Leffler. Yes, Robin Leffler is here. You're probably thinking, Robin Leffler, was she ever in Star Trek? Yes, she was. As a matter of fact, I think she was one of 2 members of the New Frontier cast of characters who actually did appear on TV. And she was played by Ashley Judd. Yes. She popped up for a couple episodes. Her biggest thing was the Leffler's Law. And in the book here, it's referred to as Lady Cowan. There's a reason for that. She married the original character in the Frontier book, and she had a baby. And she resigned from Starfleet and became the Prime Minister of New Thalon. Yeah, it's explained in the early New Frontier books where the Tholian Empire fell, and she married a Tholian. Yep. Sai Kaiwan, who was basically a prince, he basically just stayed on the Excalibur vessel as sort of an ambassador, and then he and Robin fell in love, they had a baby, he died, and now she's living with his sister. No, they're not basically romantic, just she's staying with his sister. So, so you read this book. Now, here's basically the Excalibur A. Yes, the Excalibur A is a Galaxy-class starship. Now, weirdly enough, I think it was just several years prior to this, we had the events of Star Trek Generations. Now, I'm curious, though, with this Galaxy-class. I've not found an explanation for this. But was this particular starship a former, I used to have a former name, they decided to rename it. They did it with a couple other starships in Star Trek, where there was an fully established starship, they had the original name, and then they changed it. With the Enterprise A, which originally was the Yorktown, and it was changed to Enterprise A. With Defiant, there was actually Defiant A, same class as the original one, where it was under a different name, and it was actually changed when it was rechristened as Defiant as well, more like Defiant A, because the original Defiant was destroyed by a brain weapon. Yes, believe it or not, a brain weapon that just fried the system, and basically they had to abandon ship. Yeah, so the thing is, like, if you see Defiant after Deep Space Nine, despite the fact it was kind of saying destroyed, it's a different Defiant ship because it's Defiant A. So, and you probably noticed the uniforms. Yep, it's the First Contact uniforms. The uniforms of the mid 2070s, because by Picard they switched uniforms. Yep. And I'm guessing now here's the thing. I don't know exactly the reason why they picked a Galaxy-class starship, but I'm sure this is probably Peter David. I'm sure probably for a lot of people, this is about people who love the bridge of the Enterprise D. Because you look at this like, that looks like the bridge, the Enterprise D. Well, the only reason we can say it is because here's the thing about this. So, they do this in Star Trek where ships basically, like, they had this where they sort of had Voyager pop up on an episode of Deep Space Nine as the USS Intrepid. And the story goes, they redressed the sets of Voyager and just called it Intrepid. You're like, okay, not the first time. Yeah, Star Trek, Paramount love reusing sets. They love doing that. They've been doing it as far back as the 70s. That wasn't until Voyager wrapped up when they finally decided to demolish all these frickin' sets and build brand new sets. I have heard recently that because of Starfleet Academy's, that was the most recent Star Trek show they released, because of its poor reception and a zero possibility of a season 2, that there is a rumor of demolishing the sets. So Rob's station under attack, of course. Calhoun, who's got a scar across his face. Now, I have asked Peter Dave about the base of Mackenzie Calhoun. I did ask this back at him in 2019. He, of course, passed away last year. I haven't seen him in years. Peter David is, like, if anybody had a chance to meet him, please feel free to let comments below. Tell me about your time talking to Peter David. I had a great time talking to Peter David. I did ask him about Mackenzie Calhoun. According to Peter David, he is based upon Braveheart. Yep, Braveheart. That was based on the character. Originally, it was a character meant for comic books. Then he was adapted for novels. And I did ask him about the last 3 novels released, which was The Returned, which were ebook only. As for why they were ebook only, no idea. It is very baffling to say the least. Not even he knows. He had no idea why they were exclusively as ebook, and he also had no idea of when it was going to be a physical copy. He had no idea about that. So I did ask about that. I've also asked about Young Justice, the group he helped create. He was hired to do the job. I didn't ask him about Aquaman. I didn't ask him about Aquaman. I did ask him about All New X Factor, where was he partially inspired to create that version of X Factor, the corporate sponsor version for All New X Factor on the original one? Partially. That's what he described it to me. Now, weirdly enough, this is not. I think this may have been the only IDW comic that was featuring for Peter David. For Star Trek wise, I believe so. I have to take a look at that just to be sure here. Because this guy wrote a lot, and I do mean a lot, of Star Trek books and comic books. Heck, he's been writing Star Trek stuff since the frickin' 80s. I think this may have been one of his last books he wrote. Though this book was published, I think it was in like 2008, I think it was. So to kind of understand the basis of this miniseries, you probably have been reading the New Frontier novels. My dad has read pretty much all the Star Trek books released. Well, with the exception of the last few. So, these are the books he wrote. First book he wrote was Strike Zone. That was the first novel he wrote. He also wrote Rock and Hard Place, Doomsday World, Vendetta, Q and Law. Yeah, that was the book where Q met Loxana and Choi. That was so funny. The Rift, original series book, Disheartened, Amazon 1 and 2, The Siege, Wars for Adventure from Star Trek Academy, Lie of Fire, Survivor, Q Squared. That was Q versus Tulane, who appeared from the original series. Captain's Daughter, Wrath of the Prophets, a Deep Space Nine novel. Pretty much all the New Frontier novels. IQ, which is a book he wrote, the awesome John Delancey. He wrote Enterprise Logs, a short story for that one. He wrote a couple Gateways books. Keith R. Takao, I met him. I met him at Comic-Con. Was the last time I met him was in 2019. He actually really enjoyed working with Peter David on all these books. Tales of Dominion War, Tales of Dominion Table. His last book he wrote for Star Trek was The Returned. For comics-wise, he wrote pretty much the original series comics. Like, a lot of them. Yeah, this was pretty much basically... So, for New Frontier, he wrote a one-shot Double Time, which published a DC comic. The story is called Turn Around. This, I believe, was the only New Frontier comic he wrote for IDW. I think this may have been the only book he ever wrote for them. and this is also the last one he wrote. I think this was published in 2008, I think it was. Yeah, 2008. So, think of this as sort of a tie-in to, like I mentioned before, a tie-in new novels. Shelby here, well, her rank is a little bit off here with the artwork. But the book itself is a lot of fun. I do recommend people, fans of Peter David and fans of the New Frontier novel. So, I give the book roughly a 10 out of 10 because the book was really good. Next up is Star Trek Holo-Ween, a 5-issue miniseries written by Chris Segura, who would later write the Blue Beetle comic for DC Comics. Well, I think the most recent one. Yes, the one that lasted for 11 issues. So, this was 4 issues. This is mostly put a holodeck story set in the time of the Next Generation TV show, where you have characters in the show become like monsters from horror. An overall really fun miniseries. Excellent book. This is another book I recommend. Awesome. It's really good. I give this book also a 10 out of 10. Okay, so that's pretty much it for today's video. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, to notifications. Next up, we have the first 3 new anime to discuss today. First being the final episode of Trigon Stargaze. Okay, next view.